I hear a story today where you have servers, people who are working here. They've been provided a job because they are able to collect not only a minimum wage, which we all want to make sure people have good living wages, but they are by law required to receive a certain wage. Well, guess what? With the tips that they get to take home, there are some people that are earning over $100,000 a year. More than the very people that are providing the jobs and investing not only their life savings, but their family's future. That something has to be done about that. And there's another issue that it was very interesting to hear about, Joe. This health issue, the healthcare reform bill coming out of Washington. We've heard from more business owners that they are on in a holding pattern. Obviously, here at the Eagle Street Grill, they have to have a certain number of employees to be able to service the business, so they're constantly going to be maintaining at least a certain number. But other businesses we know right now are in a holding pattern. They are not hiring because they are concerned as to what liability, financial liability, they're going to take on with this federal law. This is government acting at its worst when it's telling people how to run their business and what they're going to be able to do. Government, again, can only, can only inhibit business, can only keep it from growing as opposed to creating jobs. Right now we've got too much of it, guys. We got to pull government back. We got to put it in proper perspective to the people that are trying to create businesses, the entrepreneurs, like these two great raiders, Kevin and Joe. I love to give them a hard time. It's good to see that we have Cretin kids that succeed out there.
Oftentimes better than St. Thomas, folks.
Oftentimes better than St. Thomas, folks. But that's what makes it. That's what makes it all worth being a Minnesotan. You know that, Patrick. This is we give each other a little ribbing back and forth. This is what success is all about: allowing people to create the opportunities for themselves, their families, and the employees, the great people in St. Paul and surrounding communities. We got to get government back to answering and serving you so that you're able to do that, as opposed to having government tell you what you can't do or create through policies, whether they be tax policies or other employment regulations, telling you what you can't do. So we all want the same thing. We want you to be a success, but I think it's time that we start to look at the fact that government has become more of a regulator than a resource to you, and I think we've got to make it a resource once again. So thank you all for being here. I don't know how you want to handle this, Patrick.
Rep. Penn's got time for a few questions. Want to ask him a couple questions?
Got a question?
You know what? You guys have said this. I had somebody the other day ask me if I was upset that people ask for specifics, you know. And I told him, no, not at all. I'm a little frustrated with myself because I go out on Main Street, and I'll tell you what, you go out on Main Street and people understand exactly what I'm talking about. You know, you got to talk about a tip credit. You got to talk about the regulations. These guys are filling out paperwork constantly for their employees. And I didn't ask you, Joe, how much of your day is devoted to, if you could break it out, or in a month, are you filling out paperwork required by the state or the local or county governments?
Good solid work week.
Yeah, I mean a good solid work week where you could be actually creating opportunities. Those are the reforms we're talking about. And here, I have offered specifics all the way through. What's frustrating, I think, about my own self is that I'm not able apparently to communicate it to the bright people that are in the media, because I go out on Main Street and I talk about things like you should be eliminating the Met Council, and I give very specific things that you should be doing. People on Main Street understand it very clearly. Joe and Kevin are living it every day. They get it when I talk to them. But apparently I've got to do a better job of explaining it to some folks in the media that when we talk about specifics, it's not about just raising taxes anymore. It's how do you make government work better for these people so that when they're calling up, they're getting the resources that they need, as opposed to, well, you got to fill out a couple extra forms and you're going to have to do it at the state, county, and local level all at the same time. We didn't even get into that. I mean, the fact that we're talking about running for governor, which comes from the state level, but you got to deal with Ramsey County as well. You got to deal with the city of St. Paul as well, and then there may be a couple of other entities, whether it be an economic development or the Port Authority or who knows. You know, we didn't. What's that?
Probably about 5 of them. You know, 5 tiers all the way up to the state.
Yeah, well, you did. You absolutely did, and we can talk some more.
What would the state have to do with tip credits?
I think you've got to give these guys the opportunity. There has to be a tip credit. These guys should be getting a tip credit for the tips that their servers are collecting on a daily basis.
And how would that work?
Well, we'll talk about that. I think I want to hear from them how it should work. But again, that's here's the difference, and I understand that perhaps people are used to the politicals that come down and say, this is what we're going to do. They say for you, but what they're really saying is this is what we're going to do to you. Why don't we start talking to the business owners on Main Street and say, how can government serve you better? What should government be doing? What's frustrating your ability to get things done and create more opportunity? You just heard one. You've got a full work week that is devoted to filling out paperwork for state, county, and local officials. Clearly there's a problem there. I think we're prepared to go look at what the problem is and try to fix it so that they can operate, while others would prefer just to say we need more revenue.
Mr. Emmer,
Is there somebody from the press? That's got a
I
question?
consider myself a journalist also.
It's not your party.
It's a public event.
No, it isn't.
His website says it's a public event.
Trying to highlight, suggesting that some of these tax proposals aren't.
Yeah, Brian, you are absolutely right.
What's the
If you
question?
think about, he's asking about the S corps. If you're, because I was asking questions about how this business is formed. You know, you've got 80%, I think, of the people in Minnesota work for companies that have less than 200 employees. I think this business would fall into that category. You've got people out there that are saying we've got to raise taxes on the quote-unquote wealthy, but they don't have any concept of what that means when you're talking about a closely held corporation. I mean, they don't understand that, you know, when you're talking about $200,000, or on some plans I've seen as far down as $134,000 gross, suddenly qualifies you as a wealthy individual in the state of Minnesota. Well, guess what? I think Kevin and Joe would tell you, you start putting taxes, you qualify this business, this closely held business, as wealthy. When they're pumping everything they got back into the business, when I asked Joe, how many days do you get off? He says, well, I might get Sundays off. I might get Sundays off to spend with my family, but I'm basically the baker, the butcher, and the candlestick maker. Kevin, you and I didn't talk, but I'm guessing it's the same for you. I don't think the policymakers that are proposing these things, if they truly believe in them, I don't think they understand the ramifications when you throw that pebble into this pond where those ripples are going to go. Because it's not a matter of being wealthy, it's a matter of trying to create opportunity. And yes, we're talking about businesses like this.
What did you learn from Joe that you might want to change the state law?
Well, I didn't realize, Bill, that's a great question, but I didn't realize that this that the servers were taking home as much as 6 figures. I knew that there was an imbalance, but this isn't my business. I mean, I've talked to others who have been very adamant. You know, restaurant owners, I don't know if you call them restaurateurs, but I mean, I've heard this from others that are running small businesses all around the metro area. I haven't talked to them as much outstate, just maybe Duluth and Moorhead, but the smaller towns. I hear it mostly here in the Twin Cities, and I didn't realize that it could be that great, that somebody could be taking home well over $100,000 as a server.
Isn't that just a free market working here? So people just, reaping the benefits of hard work?
You know, Brian, the answer to that would be yes if you didn't have a minimum wage law. Then you could say that it was the free market working, because then they could hire employees at a living wage, taking into account the tips that they're taking home. But what we've done in essence is set the floor as to what they must get paid, regardless of what they get to take home in tips. And we love the people that are serving. But you know, when you could kill the goose that lays the golden egg, which is the owner of the business, they're going to end up suffering as well. I mean, if these guys can't continue to operate, then they can't continue to take advantage of the opportunity. So you got to keep both in mind, and I would agree with you. It's the free market only up until you start talking about the minimum wage law.
You suggested we repeal the minimum wage law?
Well, I don't know that you can do that. I mean, we talked about that before, not with you, but I think you got to look at what we're doing. You got to talk to these. That's why it's probably more in line with a tip credit that you got to be talking about. Plus, you know, Bill, you got federal law in there as well.
Any more questions?
Christian and federal law, do you still
Thanks a lot,
favor,
guys.
do
Really
you still
appreciate it.
favor,
Thanks for being here.
All right, thanks, Tom.
do you still favor 3738?